My name is Emma Johnson, and I suppose my story begins where most people's nightmares end. You see, I learned early in life that survival requires making choices that would horrify ordinary people. But then again, I was never really an ordinary person, was I? It all started when my mother bought 2 pounds of Gulf shrimp and peeled every single one for my little brother Luke. She claimed he needed the protein for his growing body, while I, being his older sister, could simply gnaw on the shells for calcium. When I accidentally knocked over Luke's bowl, my mother's hand flew across my face with such force that it sent me tumbling into the hallway outside our apartment. The hallway lights had been broken for weeks, leaving the corridor shrouded in complete darkness. I huddled in the corner, listening to the cheerful sounds of cartoon characters drifting from our apartment as Luke enjoyed his evening entertainment. Then suddenly, a man came rolling down the stairs from the floor above, landing with a heavy thud right beside my feet. He was dressed in an expensive business suit, though blood had soaked through the fabric in several places. His condition appeared quite serious indeed. His trembling hand shot out and grabbed my ankle with desperate strength as he gasped, "Kid, call 911 for me. This watch here could buy you a mansion, I swear it." I stared down at that timepiece glinting in the dim light filtering from under doorways. "I do not want a mansion," I replied quietly. "If I save your life, will you take me away from here?" The man seemed delirious with pain, his grip tightening around my ankle until his knuckles turned white. "What did you just say?" His breathing was labored and ragged, the metallic scent of blood overwhelming the musty odor that perpetually hung in our deteriorating building. I crouched down until my eyes were level with his, studying his pale, sweat-drenched face. I said, "Take me with you. I do not need shrimp that requires peeling. I can sleep on any floor you have, and I am quite capable of washing clothes. Just please do not make me return to that apartment." I gestured toward the crack beneath our door, where warm yellow light spilled out along with the sound of my mother's shrill voice coaxing Luke to eat just one more bite of his dinner. The man stared at me for a long moment, then erupted into violent coughing fits. With each spasm, fresh blood seeped from the wound in his abdomen. "All right," he managed to force out between clenched teeth, pressing the blood-stained watch into my small palm. "If I live through this night, I will take you with me." I nodded solemnly but made no move toward the telephone. I understood instinctively that when ambulances arrived, police cruisers inevitably followed. A man with knife wounds would certainly prefer to avoid law enforcement attention. Instead, I dragged him into the storage closet beneath the stairwell. The space was crammed with discarded lumber and cardboard boxes left over from various neighbors' renovation projects. He was incredibly heavy for my 9-year-old frame, and the effort of moving him felt like it might dislocate both my shoulders. But I gritted my teeth and persevered, moving him inch by inch like an ant relocating a massive crumb. From a pile of old clothing, I retrieved a torn jacket my father had abandoned and carefully draped it over the injured man. "Please do not die," I whispered. "If you die, I will have nowhere to go." His eyes were closed, his face as pale as old paint peeling from walls. "Do you have any medicine to stop bleeding?" I considered this request, then hurried upstairs. Rather than returning to our apartment, I knocked on Mrs. Washington's door on the 5th floor. Mrs. Washington lived alone and had a habit of hoarding medical supplies for every minor ailment imaginable. "Mrs. Washington, I have cut my hand," I announced, keeping my hands hidden behind my back while maintaining a perfectly neutral expression. Mrs. Washington squinted at me through her thick glasses. "Emma dear, why are you not in bed at this hour?" "My hand hurts. I cannot sleep." She sighed deeply and shuffled back into her apartment, rummaging through various cabinets and drawers. Moments later, she returned with a bottle of wound powder and several adhesive bandages. "Take these, child. I do worry about how often you seem to get injured." When she reached out to pat my head, I instinctively flinched away. Her hand froze in mid-air and she offered an awkward smile. I snatched the medical supplies and ran back downstairs immediately. The man had lost consciousness by the time I returned to the storage closet. I poured the entire bottle of powder directly onto his abdominal wound. The sharp pain caused his entire body to convulse as his eyes snapped open, fixing me with an intense stare that reminded me of a wild animal. But I felt no fear. I had seen far more terrifying expressions than this. The last time I forgot to wash dishes, my father had looked at me with identical fury before delivering his angry lecture. This man might appear menacing, but his current condition rendered him harmless. "Try to endure the pain," I said matter-of-factly, tearing strips from the jacket's lining to create makeshift bandages. He watched me work for several minutes, the savage gleam in his eyes gradually fading into something more complex and calculating. "What is your name?" "Emma." "Your full name?" "Emma Johnson." He fell silent for a considerable time. Eventually, he released a bitter laugh that caused him to wince as it aggravated his injuries. "You should stop using that name. What should I call myself instead?" "I have not decided yet. We can discuss it after I survive this ordeal." He remained hidden in that storage closet for 3 full days. During this period, I lived like a common thief, carefully concealing half of my breakfast bread roll each morning. The leftover portions of my school lunch found their way into my backpack as well. Each night, after my family fell asleep, I would sneak out to bring him these meager offerings. His injuries were severe, and fever consumed him for 2 entire days. I lacked money for proper medication, so I filled plastic bags with ice and applied them to his forehead through layers of towel. I was too small to help him change positions, so I focused on keeping him hydrated with frequent sips of water. Fortunately, his constitution proved remarkably strong. On the 3rd evening, his fever broke completely. He sat propped against the wooden planks, consuming my stale bread roll as though it were the finest delicacy imaginable. "This is what you have been feeding me." He raised an eyebrow while examining the rock-hard piece of bread. "If you do not want it, give it back to me." I reached out to reclaim it. He pulled his hand back protectively. Having any food at all is better than nothing. He devoured the bread in just a few bites, nearly choking in the process. I handed him half a bottle of water that I had collected from a discarded container and filled at a public restroom. He drank without complaint, consuming most of the liquid in one long gulp. "Where is that watch I gave you?" he asked suddenly. I retrieved it from my pocket and placed it in his palm. The dried blood on the band had turned black, and a crack ran across the crystal face, but the mechanism still functioned properly. "You did not attempt to sell it." "I was afraid to try," I admitted honestly. "If I took it to a pawn shop, they would assume I had stolen it and call the police." He smiled broadly and reached out to ruffle my hair. His palm was large and rough, radiating warmth. Though physical contact usually made me uncomfortable, this time I did not pull away. "Very intelligent," he said approvingly. "Pack your belongings, little one. We leave tomorrow." I looked up at him with sudden hope. "Truly? Have I ever given you reason to doubt my word?" He braced himself against the wooden boards and attempted to stand, requiring several tries before achieving stable footing. I wanted to help support him, but realized I was far too short to provide any meaningful assistance. "I have nothing worth packing," I explained. Apart from the clothes I wore and a battered backpack containing a few textbooks and a broken pencil, I owned nothing of value. The other garments were hand-me-downs from relatives' children, and I felt no attachment to them whatsoever. Excellent. Traveling light is always preferable. He leaned against the wall, his expression becoming serious and distant. Remember this carefully. Once we walk through that door, you will no longer be Emma Johnson. Then what shall I call myself? Grace Mitchell. Why Grace? Because you saved my life, which represents divine mercy. His eyes held emotions I could not fully comprehend. Also, you will carry my surname from now on. Something stirred deep within my chest. Carrying his surname felt more substantial and comforting than receiving 100 bread rolls ever could. Very well, I am Grace Mitchell. The following morning, I shouldered my backpack and left for school as usual. My mother was busy in the kitchen preparing scrambled eggs for Luke. "Emma, wash Luke's school uniform before you go," she shouted without turning around. I glanced at the uniform draped over a chair, stained with grease and food particles. Normally, I would have quietly taken it to the sink, accepting any punishment for tardiness without protest. But today felt different. I walked directly to the front door and began putting on my shoes. "Are you deaf, you worthless child?" My mother charged out of the kitchen brandishing a cooking spatula, pointing it at my nose. "I asked you to wash a simple uniform. After everything I have done raising you, you cannot even handle this basic chore." I raised my head and truly looked at her for the first time in years. I studied the wrinkles around her eyes, the sagging skin, and those perpetually judgmental, cruel eyes. This was the woman who had given birth to me and raised me. "I will not wash it," I stated clearly. My voice was quiet, but it carried distinctly in the morning stillness. My mother appeared stunned, apparently never expecting such defiance. In the next instant, her rage exploded. "How dare you talk back to me? I will beat you senseless." She raised the spatula threateningly. I remained motionless and said calmly, "I must go to school now." Then I opened the door and walked out. The spatula never fell. Perhaps she was too surprised by my decisive departure to react. Behind me, I could hear her shouting curses, but the words no longer reached my ears. I no longer wished to hear them. When I reached the ground floor, the man was leaning against the wall smoking a cigarette. He had changed into fresh clothing, a black jacket that concealed his business suit underneath. His beard was cleanly shaven, and though his complexion remained somewhat pale, his authoritative presence had fully returned. Seeing me approach, he extinguished his cigarette. "Everything settled?" "Yes." "No farewell?" "None. Just as well." He opened the door of a plain black pickup truck parked inconspicuously at the curb. "Get in." I climbed into the back seat, surrounded by the mingled scents of tobacco and unfamiliar leather. I had never ridden in such a well-appointed vehicle. Through the window, I watched our deteriorating apartment building recede into the distance. Laundry hung from every balcony like a collection of tattered flags in various colours. I caught sight of our window where Luke's small head appeared, spitting down at the street below. I turned my attention forward, toward whatever lay ahead. Goodbye forever, Emma Johnson. Thomas Mitchell brought me to an estate on the western edge of town. The property exceeded even my most extravagant childhood fantasies of royal palaces. The grounds featured elaborate gardens filled with exotic flowers I could not identify, plus an enormous artificial lake. However, I had little opportunity to appreciate these wonders. The moment we entered the main house, a group of men in black suits swarmed around us. "Mr. Mitchell, are you injured?" "Boss, how are your wounds?" "We found the traitor. What should we do with him?" Their anxious voices overlapped as they bombarded him with questions. Thomas raised his hand for silence. These minor cuts will not kill me. He gestured toward me. Arrange a room for this young lady and call a physician to examine her. She is far too thin. A man wearing wire-rimmed glasses stepped forward and studied me carefully. Mr. Mitchell, is this the child who rescued you? Yes. How shall we proceed with her care? Thomas glanced at me briefly, then stated matter-of-factly, raise her as my daughter. Absolute silence fell over the assembled group. Everyone stared at me with expressions of complete disbelief. The bespectacled man pushed his glasses up nervously and stammered, Sir, surely you are not serious. This child has no known background or family connections. My own life was salvaged from unknown circumstances, Thomas replied coldly, fixing the man with an intimidating stare. Do you have additional concerns? No, sir, absolutely none. The man responded immediately, bowing his head submissively. Thus I became a member of the Mitchell household. I was given a spacious, brightly lit bedroom with a bed as soft as floating clouds. The closet contained beautiful new clothing in every style imaginable, and the household chef prepared elaborate meals with endless variety. Yet happiness eluded me entirely. A profound unease consumed my thoughts constantly. Could such miraculous good fortune truly befall someone like me? I remained convinced this was merely a dream from which I would eventually awaken, finding myself back in that mouldy hallway, shivering in the cold. Therefore, I never dared sleep in complete darkness or allow myself to rest too deeply. The slightest sound would jolt me instantly awake, my hand reaching for the fruit knife hidden beneath my pillow. I had stolen that blade from the kitchen. Only when gripping it firmly could I feel even a fragment of security. Thomas seemed to recognize my persistent anxiety, but he offered no direct commentary. Instead, he had my bedroom door fitted with a complex electronic lock that only he and I could operate. He also installed an emergency alarm button beside my bed that would summon every security guard on the property within seconds. While you live here, no one can harm you, he announced during dinner one evening, placing a piece of fried chicken on my plate. That includes myself. Looking down at that chicken, I felt an unexpected warmth behind my eyes. I ate quickly with my head down, determined not to let him witness my emotional response. After approximately 1 month, I began adapting to this new existence. Thomas arranged for exceptional private tutors to help me catch up on missed schoolwork. I treasured this educational opportunity and applied myself with fierce dedication. I understood that education was the only path to genuine transformation, the only way to establish permanent stability in my life. One evening, after completing my homework, I went downstairs for a glass of water. As I passed the study, I heard raised voices from within. The door stood slightly ajar, and while I had no intention of eavesdropping, the argument was impossible to ignore. Thomas, have you completely lost your mind? Adopting some street child was bad enough, but now you want to transfer company shares to her. The speaker was a woman with a sharp, grating voice. That decision is mine alone, and none of your concern, Thomas replied icily. None of my concern. Do not forget that I invested years of my life building this company alongside you. Are you really willing to sacrifice everything we have built together for some random orphan? Built together? Thomas laughed bitterly. When I was being hunted by killers, bleeding to death in that wretched hallway, where exactly were you? Probably celebrating my impending demise in some hotel room with your lover. The study fell into deathly silence. After a long pause, the woman's voice returned, trembling with shock. You know about that. Actions have consequences, and secrets rarely remain hidden forever. Get out of my house. I heard the rapid clicking of high heels departing. Hidden around the stair corner, I watched a woman in a red coat storm past, shooting me a venomous glare filled with pure hatred and malice. I recognized her immediately. This was Amanda Foster, a powerful businesswoman, frequently featured in financial magazines and Thomas's nominal fiancée. I knew their relationship was a business arrangement built on mutual benefit rather than genuine affection. However, I had never imagined she would actually want Thomas dead. After her departure, I entered the study carrying my water glass. Thomas sat in his chair, staring at a photograph of a young woman holding an infant, both smiling radiantly. "Is that your mother?" I asked. Thomas looked up and tucked the photograph into a drawer. "No, just someone from long ago." He studied my face carefully. "Come here." I approached his desk as he opened another drawer and withdrew a legal document. "This is a stock transfer agreement," he explained. "Your signature would give you 10% ownership in the company." I stepped back in alarm. "I do not want it." "Why not?" "I did not save your life for money," I said earnestly, meeting his gaze directly. "Besides, accepting such wealth would be dangerous. I lack the power to protect it." Amanda's murderous expression was still fresh in my memory. If I accepted those shares, I doubted I would survive until morning. Thomas smiled with genuine pleasure. "You truly are the child I hoped you would become, appropriately cautious and intelligent." He closed the document and returned it to the drawer. "Very well. I shall hold these shares in trust until you mature and develop the strength to claim them properly. However, you must understand an important principle," he continued, his expression becoming serious. "In this world, caution alone cannot ensure survival. You also need genuine power. I intend to make you strong enough that no one will dare threaten you." From that day forward, my schedule included additional subjects: hand-to-hand combat, firearms training, and martial arts. My instructor was a former Marine sergeant who showed no mercy during our sessions. The daily training was exhausting and frequently resulted in injuries, but I persevered without complaint. I never cried out in pain or shed a single tear because I understood that Thomas was preparing me for survival. He was teaching me how to navigate a predatory world where only the strong endure. One afternoon, while I practiced boxing combinations in the gymnasium, Robert Kim burst through the doors in obvious panic. "Miss Grace, something terrible has happened to Mr. Mitchell." My heart sank as I stopped mid-punch. "What has occurred?" "Mr. Mitchell went to inspect the abandoned oil refinery on the west side of town and was ambushed by Amanda's men. Furthermore," he continued breathlessly, "we have received reports that Amanda has kidnapped your brother from your original family." "My brother?" I felt confused. What brother? That cartoon-watching, spitting little creature who had once shared my apartment. "Yes, the boy named Luke. Amanda claims she will harm him unless you surrender your company shares." My mind reeled with shock. Had Amanda lost her sanity completely? Why would she kidnap that useless child? And how could Thomas, with his extensive security detail, fall into such an obvious trap? Something felt fundamentally wrong about this situation. "Miss Grace, you must rescue Mr. Mitchell immediately. Time is running out," Robert continued his urgent pleading. I studied his artificially panicked expression and suddenly smiled. "You betrayed Thomas, did you not?" Robert's face froze in shock. "Miss Grace, what are you suggesting? My loyalty to our boss is absolute." "Absolute loyalty?" I slowly unwrapped the tape from my hands. "If you truly understood me, you would know that my so-called brother means absolutely nothing to me. Using him as leverage is laughable. As for Thomas..." I walked to the weapons rack and selected an unsharpened practice knife, testing its weight in my palm. If he could not handle someone like Amanda, he would never have survived this long. Robert's complexion turned ashen. He stumbled backward and reached for his concealed weapon, but I moved faster. The knife flew from my hand and struck his wrist precisely. "Ah!" he screamed as his pistol clattered to the floor. Several security guards rushed in and pinned him down. I retrieved the fallen weapon and pressed its barrel against his forehead. "Tell me Amanda's real objective." Robert writhed in agony, but remained stubbornly silent. Nothing to say. I applied pressure with the gun barrel. "Then allow me to speculate. She wants to lure me to that location, create an accident, and eliminate both Thomas and me simultaneously." Robert's pupils contracted sharply, confirming my suspicions. At that moment, my phone rang with an unknown number. When I answered, Amanda's triumphant laughter filled the speaker. "Little pest, you are not as stupid as I anticipated. However, you remain naive. Do you seriously believe I would rely solely on that worthless brother of yours?" Background noise indicated chaos and struggle, followed by a familiar yet distant voice crying out, "Emma, please save me. Emma, they are hurting me." It was my mother. My grip tightened involuntarily around the phone. "How do you like this bargaining chip?" Amanda's voice slithered through the speaker like a venomous snake. 30 minutes. Come alone to the West Side oil refinery. Bring anyone else, and your mother dies with you." The line went dead, leaving only the dial tone. I stood motionless, listening to the electronic silence while experiencing an unexpected calm. My mother had been kidnapped. The same woman who peeled shrimp exclusively for Luke locked me outside in hallways and threatened me with kitchen utensils. Her fate should mean nothing to me. I should feel satisfaction at this poetic justice, yet why did my hands continue trembling? Was this lingering family connection, or simply the final traces of misplaced conscience? I drew a deep breath and tucked the weapon behind my back. "Prepare a vehicle," I instructed the guards. "Miss Grace, Mr. Mitchell specifically forbade you from leaving the property," one guard replied uncomfortably. "Step aside," I said coldly. "I accept full responsibility for any consequences." The guard hesitated briefly, but ultimately moved out of my way. I knew they lacked the authority to stop me. I also knew this was obviously a trap. But I needed to go, not to rescue that woman, but to finally close this chapter of my past. To permanently sever all ties with Emma Johnson. The abandoned oil refinery sprawled across the western outskirts like a mechanical graveyard. Rusted pipes and empty storage tanks dotted the landscape among tall weeds. I parked on the access road and walked in alone. Strong winds whipped around me constantly, making me shiver uncontrollably. Yet I maintained perfect posture as I advanced step by step. On the second floor of a derelict office building, I found Amanda. She wore a striking red coat and stood beside a concrete pillar, smoking an elegant cigarette. Behind her, two figures sat bound and gagged with tape. One was my mother, the other was Luke. Both made muffled sounds of terror as they struggled against their restraints. When Amanda saw me arrive, she smiled with exaggerated delight. How touching, such devoted family loyalty. She exhaled smoke rings while looking at me with complete contempt. I assumed a cold-blooded creature like you would not care about their survival. I stopped approximately 30 feet away from her. "Release them," I said quietly. "I am here. If you want to kill someone, make it me." "Release them." Amanda ground her cigarette beneath her heel with vicious satisfaction. "Nothing could be that simple. Grace, do you know what I despise most about you? That insufferably arrogant attitude. You are nothing but a sewer rat pretending to be aristocracy." She gestured sharply, and several muscular men emerged from concealment carrying iron bars. "Beat her! Break her legs!" I remained perfectly still, watching coldly as they approached. Just as they came within striking distance, I suddenly drew my weapon and fired one shot into the air. The gunshot reverberated throughout the empty refinery, creating an ear-splitting echo. The attackers froze in surprise, clearly not expecting me to be armed. Amanda also appeared stunned. "Where did you get that gun?" she demanded. "Thomas gave it to me," I lied. Actually, I had taken it from the training facility. The weapon contained only 3 bullets total. I had just used one, leaving 2 remaining. "Amanda, do you really think I came here alone?" I raised the gun and moved closer slowly. "Thomas's men have already surrounded this entire facility. Release your hostages now, and you might still have a chance to escape." Amanda's expression shifted nervously as she glanced toward the windows. During her momentary distraction, I lunged forward. I knew I could not defeat those large men physically, but if I could capture Amanda, I would control the situation, eliminate the leader first. Unfortunately, I overestimated my speed while underestimating Amanda's ruthlessness. One of her men reacted quickly and struck my back with his iron bar. Searing pain shot through my body as I stumbled and fell. The gun flew from my hands and slid across the floor to Amanda's feet. "Ha ha ha!" Amanda snatched up the weapon and laughed maniacally. "Little fool, did you think you could deceive me?" She pointed the barrel at my head. "Let us see how you die this time." I lay on the concrete floor, feeling as though my internal organs had been displaced. Staring into that black barrel, I closed my eyes in despair. Was this really how my life would end? Suddenly, a tremendous crash shook the building. Not gunfire, the sound of a heavy vehicle smashing through the refinery wall. Debris and dust filled the air as an SUV burst through the barrier. Before it stopped moving, a figure leapt out. Black coat, piercing eyes. Thomas had arrived. He moved with deadly efficiency, quickly neutralizing all the attackers before they could react. Amanda stood paralyzed with terror, dropping the gun as she screamed and attempted to flee. But Thomas intercepted her instantly, gripping her throat with crushing force. "Did you ask my permission before touching what belongs to me?" Thomas spoke in low, deadly tones that promised inevitable destruction. Amanda clawed desperately at his hand as her face turned purple from oxygen deprivation. "Thomas, please, spare me." Too late. Thomas tightened his grip as Amanda's eyes rolled back and consciousness began fading. "Thomas!" I called out. Thomas paused and looked in my direction. Having second thoughts. I struggled to stand, wiping blood from the corner of my mouth. "No." I picked up the fallen weapon and walked to where Amanda lay gasping. "I want to finish this myself." Thomas released his hold, allowing Amanda to collapse onto the floor, gulping air desperately. When she saw the gun in my hands, real fear finally entered her eyes. "Grace, please, I was forced into this. I had no choice." She crawled toward me, trying to grab my legs. I stepped backward, avoiding her filthy hands. "My name is not Emma. I am Grace. Grace Mitchell." I raised the weapon and aimed at the center of her forehead. But just as I was about to pull the trigger, my mother broke free from her bonds and threw herself between us. "Emma, do not kill anyone. Murder is a capital crime." She knelt before me, sobbing hysterically. "Please, I am begging you, let her go. She is powerful. We cannot afford to cross someone like her." I stared at this woman who would kneel and plead for a stranger's life while watching me face death without concern. The last ember of warmth in my heart extinguished completely. "Mother, do you understand why she wants to kill me?" I asked calmly, For money, for those worthless dollars, she was willing to take my life, and you, to save your own skin, you would watch me die. My mother stared at me speechlessly, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I smiled coldly and tossed the gun to Thomas. This is pointless, I declared. Killing trash like this would only dirty my hands. I turned and walked away without looking back. Thomas watched my retreating figure with an enigmatic smile. Behind me, I heard sounds of struggle and commotion. Amanda was taken away by Thomas's men and never seen again. The confrontation at the refinery ended like a poorly written drama, concluding as abruptly as it began. Amanda disappeared, officially reported as traveling abroad for medical treatment. My mother and Luke were returned to their hometown with enough money to last their remaining years, but with strict orders never to set foot in Texas again. When Thomas asked why I had not killed Amanda, I explained that death would have been too merciful. Living with suffering was far more appropriate punishment. Thomas asked no further questions and simply forced me to accept the stock transfer documents. This time I did not refuse. I understood that I had finally earned the right to this inheritance, because I was no longer the little girl who once cowered in dark corners. Life seemed to return to normal, but I sensed underlying tensions. Thomas worked increasingly late hours, often staying away from home entirely. The household security staff rotated frequently, and the general atmosphere grew noticeably strained. I suspected something significant was developing. One night, while reviewing my studies, the electricity suddenly failed. The entire estate plunged into complete darkness. My heart raced as I immediately reached for the knife beneath my pillow. Soft footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, not the heavy, familiar tread of our security patrols, but something light and urgent, like a cat crossing rooftops. Someone had infiltrated the house. I held my breath and pressed myself into the shadows beside my bed. The door lock clicked softly as someone picked it open. A dark silhouette slipped inside. He carried something that glinted coldly in the moonlight filtering through my window. A blade. He crept toward my bed and raised the weapon to strike downward. The sound of steel-piercing fabric and stuffing filled the silent room. But I was not underneath those covers. I had arranged pillows to simulate a sleeping body hours earlier. During the intruder's momentary confusion, I attacked from behind, pressing my knife against his throat. "Do not move!" The figure froze completely. "Who sent you here?" I demanded coldly. He remained silent, then suddenly grabbed my wrist and twisted sharply. Pain shot through my arm as I lost my grip on the blade. However, instead of using this advantage to kill me, he rolled away and accidentally knocked over my nightstand. Emergency lighting activated throughout the room. I could now see my attacker clearly, a young man with refined features but eyes as cold as winter storms. He wore black clothing designed for stealth operations, and fresh blood seeped through a bandage on his arm. "Who are you?" I asked warily, grabbing a heavy lamp as an improvised weapon. The man clutched his wounded arm while studying me carefully. Then he smiled unexpectedly. "You truly are the wolf cub that Thomas Mitchell raised, properly suspicious. Who exactly are you?" "I came here to rescue you," he said, offering an explanation that made no sense whatsoever. "Rescue me?" "Thomas intends to use you as a scapegoat," the man announced with shocking directness. "His current situation has become extremely dangerous. Federal investigators are closing in, and he needs someone to take responsibility for his crimes. You represent the perfect sacrifice, orphaned, with questionable origins, and conveniently holding those incriminating company shares. By framing you as the mastermind behind his money laundering operation, he can escape justice entirely." My heart lurched painfully. His words sounded absurd, yet contained a terrifying internal logic. I remembered that mysterious stock transfer, Robert's comment about my unknown background, and countless other suspicious details. Could everything truly be an elaborate deception? "I do not believe you," I said through gritted teeth. "Thomas saved my life." "He saved you in order to exploit you," the man replied with bitter laughter. "Do you honestly think he adopted you out of gratitude? A ruthless business magnate would never treat a random child as his daughter simply because she helped him. Stop being naive, Grace." Hearing him use my name sent another shock through my system. "How do you know what I am called?" "Because I know far more than you realize," the man said as he slowly stood, maintaining his defensive posture. "I know your original name was Emma Johnson, and that you lived in that deteriorating apartment complex on the east side. I also know exactly why Thomas was in that building the night you found him. He went there to commit murder." My mind exploded with confusion. "What are you saying?" "Thomas went to that building to eliminate a witness, an accountant who possessed evidence of his company's illegal financial activities. That man lived directly above your family's apartment. Thomas killed him and was fleeing when rivals attacked him, causing the injuries that made him tumble down those stairs. When you discovered him, he suffered from more than knife wounds. There were also bullet holes. But you were too young to recognize the difference. He asked for your help not from gratitude, but because he needed cover. An innocent little girl makes the perfect human shield." I felt the world spinning around me. If this was all true, then what did my past 2 years mean? What about all my gratitude and affection? "What proof do you have?" I struggled to maintain composure. The man produced a photograph from his pocket and tossed it to me. The image showed a corpse in a business suit, face down in a pool of blood. Beside the body lay a watch, the same timepiece Thomas had given me. "This photograph was taken at the crime scene," the man explained. "The victim's name was David Chen, and he possessed comprehensive evidence of Mitchell Energy Corporation's money laundering operations. Thomas killed him to prevent exposure." I held the photograph with trembling hands. "David Chen." I recognized that name from somewhere. Yes, during a dinner conversation when Thomas took a phone call and mentioned that this person deserved to die. "You still doubt me?" the man observed my expression. "Then let me share another fact. Do you know why those men were pursuing Thomas that night? It was not an assassination attempt. They were trying to recover evidence. Before his death, David Chen had given copies of his documentation to an associate. The attackers wanted those files, not Thomas's life. Thomas deceived everyone, including you. He convinced you that you were a heroic rescuer when actually you were just another tool for escaping justice." My entire world collapsed around me. Every beautiful moment from the past 2 years, every kindness, every gift, every word of affection, dissolved like soap bubbles bursting in the air. I remembered Thomas's protective promises. "While you live here, no one can harm you." It had all been lies. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice now hoarse with emotion. "My name is Jake Morrison, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The man displayed official credentials. "We have been investigating this case for 2 full years. Thomas Mitchell is an exceptionally cunning criminal whose energy corporation serves as a massive money laundering operation for criminal organizations nationwide. We have been unable to find a breakthrough until we discovered your existence. Grace, you represent our only hope." I laughed bitterly. "Hope? I am nothing but a scapegoat." "No, you are much more than that." Jake's expression grew earnest. "You possess shares in Mitchell Corporation, which grants you access to company financial records. If you agree to cooperate with our investigation, we can obtain all necessary evidence to arrest Thomas and his entire network." I remained silent for a long time. Outside, the wind continued howling while the estate lay unnaturally quiet. I understood this was the most crucial decision of my entire life. "If I help you," I said slowly, "what do I receive in return?" "Freedom," Jake replied simply. "True freedom. Never again will you serve as anyone's pawn or bear responsibility for crimes you did not commit." I thought back to 2 years ago when I asked Thomas if he would take me away. I believed I had found freedom then, only to discover I had merely traded one prison for another. "Very well," I decided firmly. "I agree." Over the following days, I maintained my normal routine while secretly collecting evidence. Using my shareholder privileges, I examined vast quantities of corporate documents. Just as Jake predicted, Mitchell Energy Corporation's financial records contained massive irregularities, dozens of shell companies, countless suspicious fund transfers, all pointing toward an enormous money laundering network. I secretly copied these files and transmitted them to Jake. However, we underestimated Thomas's vigilance. That evening, just after I finished transmitting the final documents, I heard multiple sets of footsteps in the corridor outside my room. Not one person, an entire group. Thomas entered with several bodyguards trailing behind, his expression darker than a thundercloud. "Grace, we need to have a conversation." His voice remained calm, but I detected the rage simmering beneath the surface. I closed my laptop computer and looked at him steadily. "What shall we discuss?" "Your recent activities," Thomas said as he approached my desk, looming over me. "For instance, why federal agents have been detected in your bedroom." My heart sank, though I maintained my composure. "I have no idea what you mean." Thomas smiled coldly and withdrew a recording device from his pocket. When he pressed play, my conversation with Jake filled the room. "Thomas intends to use you as a scapegoat." "I agree." My face turned ashen. He had installed surveillance equipment throughout my bedroom. "Grace, I am deeply disappointed," Thomas said as he pocketed the recorder. "I treated you like my own daughter, yet you chose to betray me." "Daughter?" I stood up, displaying anger toward Thomas for the first time. "In your eyes I was nothing but a chess piece, a disposable scapegoat." "You know everything now." Thomas raised an eyebrow without showing the slightest trace of guilt. "Did those federal agents explain everything to you?" "Yes, I know it all. David Chen, the money laundering, and the truth about your murderous activities that night." My voice shook, not from fear, but from the profound pain of betrayal. "So what if you know?" Thomas's mask finally slipped completely, revealing his true nature. "Grace, do you believe you are fighting for justice? You are mistaken. There is no justice in this world, only the strong and the weak. I gave you 2 years of comfort. Now it is time for you to repay that debt." "Repay how? By going to prison in your place?" "Precisely." Thomas nodded approvingly. "Tomorrow, federal investigators will discover that all of Mitchell Corporation's illegal activities were conducted under your authority. You will become the mastermind of this money laundering operation while I remain an innocent victim who was deceived." "You have lost your mind. I am only 11 years old. No one will believe I masterminded anything." "Age is irrelevant." Thomas produced forged documentation. "According to these papers, you are actually 18 years old. Emma Johnson was merely a false identity. Your real name is Elena Volkov, a financial genius from Russia who specializes in money laundering for criminal enterprises." I stared at the perfectly fabricated documents, feeling completely hopeless. He had been preparing for this moment from the very beginning. "Grace, do not appear so distressed." Thomas reached out to stroke my hair, but I jerked away violently. "You will not die, just serve some prison time. When the situation calms down, I will arrange your release." "I do not trust you," I said coldly. "You are capable of murdering an 11-year-old child. What else could you not do?" Thomas's eyes instantly became dangerous. "You make an excellent point. If you refuse to cooperate, I might indeed resort to extreme measures. After all, a disobedient chess piece has no value whatsoever." At that moment, alarms began blaring throughout the estate, followed by the sound of intense gunfire. Thomas's expression changed dramatically as he turned to shout at his men. "What is happening?" One guard rushed in with a report. "Boss, federal agents have surrounded the property. They have search warrants." Joy exploded in my chest. Jake had kept his word. They had come for me. Thomas looked at me with murderous intent. "Your friends arrived to rescue you. Unfortunately, they are too late." He drew his weapon and pointed it at me. "Grace, you will never leave this place alive. I will become a grieving father who lost his beloved adopted daughter in a tragic accident." I closed my eyes, preparing for death, but the gunshot never came. Instead, Thomas cried out in pain. When I opened my eyes, Jake was climbing through my window, having quickly neutralized Thomas's threat. "Grace! This way!" Jake shouted. I did not hesitate, immediately running toward the window. Behind me, Thomas roared in fury. "Kill her! Kill her!" Several bodyguards tried to stop us, but Jake's colleagues had already surrounded the building. After a brief but intense confrontation, all resistance was overcome. I followed Jake through the window into the estate gardens. FBI agents moved efficiently throughout the grounds, systematically securing the area. "Grace, are you injured?" Jake asked with concern. I shook my head and looked back at the mansion where flames now flickered in several windows. My home, my father, everything had turned to ashes in a single night. "Will they capture Thomas?" I asked. "Absolutely," Jake replied with certainty. "This time we have sufficient evidence." Indeed, Thomas was brought out shortly afterward with bandaged wrists and a pale complexion, though his eyes remained filled with malice. When he saw me, he smiled with chilling menace. "Grace," he called loudly, "do you think this ends anything? I have plenty of friends in prison. You cannot escape forever." I looked at this man who had once provided warmth and comfort, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Then I walked directly to him and spoke quietly, so only we could hear. "Thomas, thank you for teaching me an important lesson. In this world, only we ourselves can truly protect us." Then I turned and walked away without looking back. 2 years later, I sat in the University of Texas library, surrounded by stacks of law books. I had decided to study jurisprudence because I wanted to use legal weapons to protect myself and help others who found themselves as helpless as I once was. Thomas ultimately received a life sentence. His money laundering network was completely dismantled, leading to the arrest of hundreds of criminals. Meanwhile, I received new identity protection and the opportunity to start fresh. My case became a textbook example, demonstrating how a minor exploited by criminal organizations could courageously report illegal activities and assist law enforcement in breaking up major money laundering operations. The media called me a little hero. But only I knew the truth. I was no hero. I was simply someone who wanted to survive. I often thought about that 9-year-old girl named Emma Johnson, remembering how she curled up in dark hallways, shivering with cold. That child died on a blood-soaked night 2 years ago. Now I am Grace Morrison. The FBI had given me this new identity. I no longer needed anyone's charity or protection because I had learned how to protect myself. My phone buzzed with a message from Jake. Grace, we have another case involving a child being exploited by gangs. Would you be willing to speak with her? I gathered my books and replied with a single word. Yes. Walking out of the library into the warm Texas sunshine, I remembered an old saying. When God closes one door, he inevitably opens a window. And I had finally found the window that belonged to me.